Chris Sembroski, welcome to the Astro Ben Podcast. How are you?
Hey Ben, thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm very excited to chat to you. You're definitely up there in my dream guests roster. So I finally got you on, which is great. Um, I'd I'd like to sort of start just with your story. Obviously, I think a lot of people that listen to the podcast kind of know. Well, they kind of know what happens with Inspiration 4, but perhaps you could just tell anyone that maybe isn't familiar, how did you go to space? How on
Oh
earth did
gosh,
you go to space?
how on earth? I love the way you put that. That's great. How on earth did I go to space? Well, we have a little competition that happens once a year over here in the U.S. called the Super Bowl, and like many folks, we get excited and get all the snacks laid out. So I'm sitting in my living room, and my wife's on the other side of out of the couch, and we're just have all this junk food laid out in front of us, and you know, none of the teams in this particular game are ones that we normally root for, but we're watching for the commercials and the halftime show, and maybe the game a little bit just to see what's happening. But anyway, a commercial comes on talking about how you can win a trip to space. Just go to inspiration4.com and you can support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And so I pull out my phone, just very nonchalantly and maybe underneath my wife's nose. And I don't know if she knows exactly what I was doing, but I go up to the website and realize, oh, this is a really cool thing. I'll donate to St. Jude and that'll be it. I might get a fun patch out of it and I'll forget about it and that'll be okay. But I've always loved space and all things space, and so my wife knows she married a rocket nerd when we got together, um, and so it was just one of those things that it went. I like I said, put my name in the hat, and a month goes by. I completely forgot about who Inspiration Four was, and then one morning, it was my wife's chance to sleep in, and I was taking the girls, our daughters, to go get some breakfast, pick up some donuts that morning. And my wife says that you left your phone on the nightstand, Chris. I'm trying to sleep in, but it keeps buzzing. Someone called Inspiration 4 keeps trying to call you. And so I find out that they are looking for some more information and convinced me to get onto a Zoom call the next day. And I realized that, well, this is kind of a cool thing. I forgot about this completely, but I get on the call the next day and I see Jared Isaacman, I see Kid Poteet, and then next thing I know, I see a good friend of mine from college who was the best man at my wedding, and we live in opposite corners of the country. And it's good to see him there. I didn't realize what exactly was going on. How in the world did he get connected to this? And is this a group interview? Are we competing or something right now? And well, it turns out I had lost that sweepstakes, but my friend Kyle had actually won the sweepstakes and he was not able to go. And next thing I know, he's telling Jared, yep, this is the guy that I think you should send in my place. And Jared looks into the camera and says, "So I'm going to pick you up in 3 days. We're going to go do some medical testing and screenings in California, and you're going to go to space this year." I was just sitting there in shock and just trying to imagine what in the world this meant.
Wow. And that's why you're the luckiest man in the world, for sure.
It's something else, yeah.
And how do you ever repay a favor like that back? It's not sort of something you can say, oh, I'll get you a couple of beers or take you out for dinner. Like, I mean,
No.
do you feel like you owe him so much?
Oh my gosh. Well, all along the journey, whenever an opportunity came up, we had several events happen that year that where we could bring folks together, and whenever his schedule would allow, I would do my best to include him. And I think one special thing that was kind of fun to do was that as astronauts leave Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, there is an old phone that is like your last phone call on Earth that you get to make from the top of the launch tower just before you get strapped into the vehicle. And my wife and I had already said our goodbye, so we knew that we didn't need to have another chance to call each other. And so I made that call and decided to give him that call from the top of the pad. And he just like, "What are you doing?" He just starts laughing. "I just figured I'd give you a call before launch myself into a rocket.
Wow. And how, I don't know if you know this, but how many tickets did he buy to win that sweepstake? Because you see these competitions, and unfortunately I did enter, but I didn't read the small print, and actually non-US citizens couldn't have won in the first place, but obviously the money still
Yeah.
went to a good cause. But how many did he buy? Was it one lucky ticket, or did he buy the sort of maximum? Do you know?
Yeah. Oh no, I don't know if there was a maximum, since any amount of money would have gone to St. Jude, and we had a huge goal to reach. So I know I put in $50, and I think it was like 150 that he put in. So nothing extreme or outrageous, but still still a very generous thing on his part to donate to St. Jude to begin with. And then of course, um, I'm going to be in his debt for a while. So.
and and I mean, it's such a fascinating and unique story. And now you've sort of had some time to reflect. And there's an amazing documentary on Netflix about the whole mission, and I think documents it quite well, which probably a lot of people have seen. But looking back on it now, what was were there any sort of specific things that you learnt about yourself throughout the whole process? Because doing things like the high altitude training and the fast jet experiences, they sound fun on paper, but actually you are putting yourself outside of your comfort zone in quite a big way. So you must have, now you've reflected, what did you learn about yourself through that whole period?
Really great question. I think that, not just about me, but just everybody in general can think about how you can do things that you probably never dreamed that you would possibly do. I think it was just very important to be willing to say yes to the odd and scary and weird and fantastical things that were happening. Um, I think that remaining humble throughout the process with my crew and the teammates really was a huge game changer, and not just me myself personally, but I learned a lot about how to form a team and how to form a crew where you really have to set the ground rules up front, and you can go to space very similarly how an air show demonstration team works, or any other flight crew or squadron works together. And you put together the ground rules, you debrief after every event, you call out yourself, you call out your crew members on things, and there's always an opportunity to do things better the next time or to improve. And there's never there's never a perfect event, right? There's always something that could have gone slightly better. And I think the biggest thing was that it was taking a lot of the things I'd done in the Air Force and just some of the experiences that we worked on together as a crew, especially climbing, Mount Rainier, which is a 14,000-foot volcano, ice covered and snow covered here in Washington State. That it was so important to get really used to the idea that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, that it's okay to be in a place where you're not feeling you're great and still have fun and still perform, and still okay to rely on your teammates.
Sure. And just on that sort of feeling uncomfortable,
Yeah.
where were you most uncomfortable? Was it was it on the pre-launch, or was there a particular moment during the mission that was
Gosh,
particularly?
well,
I can
before the
think.
launch, yeah, well,
Yeah.
and you said you saw the Netflix documentary, and well, obviously they did not. Well, they absolutely felt it was very appropriate to show me get sick on the this interview, but that was actually a really fun thing. So there were some moments like that where I did have a little bit of nausea, but I was having fun through those. I think it's really strange to say. After all the training we had, launch and reentry, they weren't scary. I knew what was going to happen. I had a lot of confidence in the team that was behind us and the crew at SpaceX that trained us. I had this. It's so crazy to say, but it was important to me to play music in space. And so I brought a ukulele with me, and I had such bad stage fright in front of my crewmates. I don't know why it is, but like playing and singing in front of your friends is one of the most terrifying things you can do if you're not well rehearsed in it.
Oh, sure. And I've no doubt that your crewmates remain very good friends to you to this day. I mean, an experience like that, it definitely, you must be so tight. Do you still see each other and speak to each other since the mission?
Yeah, it's we've still got our group chat going on our on our iPhones, and we still get together. I think we met up together at the beginning of October this year. So yeah, we're still in constant contact. Not, of course, not as often as we were during the time leading up to Inspiration 4's launch, but yeah, there are so many things going on in space these days, especially with Jared going up again with Polaris Dawn and everyone on the Inspiration 4 crew. We all know Anna and Sarah and Kid very well, and so we're heavily invested in their safety and their experience. And so, yeah, I mean, we stay in contact, constantly.
Well, I'm really lucky that I've actually managed to chat to all the Polaris Dawn crew on the podcast. So what's your involvement with them at the moment? I know the Polaris
I
Dawn
get to
mission's
be a
been
I get to be a cheerleader for them, more or less, right? I
yeah.
mean, so so it just being there to answer any questions or give my 2 cents, or they're doing things that are never done before in a commercial or private mission. So um, my role is just really to support in any way possibly I can. So obviously I don't work for SpaceX. I work for the competition. I work for Blue Origin now, and so um, there's not a lot of direct involvement that I do with the technology or the training. You're just bouncing ideas off, or if something comes up, I'll shoot a message to Jared's way to say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Um, but otherwise, it's really just being there and being excited for what they're doing next.
That's amazing. Well, I'd love to come back to Blue Origin actually, if that's okay.
Sure.
But just on the sort of relatable side of how you came across in the documentary, I think that's really powerful because you see the rest of your crew. You've got Jared, obviously, inspirational leader. You've got Haley Arsenault, who's a hero and inspiring herself, and Dr. Siam Proctor, who was the perfect person to win the place. But you very much seems the relatable one. People like me who kind of see and think, oh, if that bloke can do it, you know,
Right.
I can do it, which I think was
Yeah.
really good. You
I
know,
think if you're willing to train to run a 5K, I think you can train to go to a space flight, or you can train to orbit the Earth. So yeah,
well,
yeah,
that's hugely important. As
yeah.
as space tourism becomes a reality, it is
Hmm.
important that people see quote unquote normal people going to
Yeah,
space. Did you
absolutely.
did you think about that when you were on your mission? Did you think, like, I imagine you have a lot of normal friends, and you weren't necessarily friends with astronauts and uh,
Right. Well,
etc.
yeah. Well, my wife would very much disagree with your definition of me being normal, but no, but I think you're right, and I think it's important. And when I was in college, and my friend Kyle, we were lobbying Congress in Washington D.C. To talk about opening up space for more people, and there are lots of things that are out there right now. There's Space for Humanity that's looking to send as many different people from all different backgrounds into space, whether it's on a New Shepard or on Virgin Galactic's flights. And then and then I mentioned New Shepard. I mean, that's a big part of what New Shepard and Virgin are doing. They're making space accessible for more people to live that dream of going to space, to experience um, that opportunity to have an overview effect. And so uh, I love the idea that I'm quote unquote a normal guy. Yeah, I definitely had to push and stretch my abilities a little bit here and there when it came to hitting the gym again for a little while. Just but you're balancing all those things with family life. I've got 2 young daughters, and my wife who's a school teacher, and uh, balancing between that and paying the mortgage. And as soon as I came back from space, a couple weeks later, we're getting back into the routine. Get back in the nine to
Sure.
five job and mowing the grass and all those things that everybody does. And I I love that idea that space is opening up and is being more accessible to more people.
Mm. And your daughters, I don't know if you've talked about this publicly, but what were their thoughts on seeing Daddy go to space? I mean, it must have been. It's not like they had years building up to it. It all happened sort of within a year. Like,
Within six
what's
months, yeah, it was
wow.
ridiculously fast, and I spent a lot of time away from home doing some of the training events, and so it was quick. My youngest was 3 during that time. In fact, she turned 3 during the announcement, and so we were. She said we had some good friends that helped bring a birthday cake to celebrate in an Orlando hotel for her, things like that. Uh, but so yeah, she had this cool idea that she was going to try to go to space with Dad because she had her little SpaceX astronaut suit onesie, and I had my astronaut suit. They looked very much alike, and she was really bummed that I left her behind. My oldest, she was 9 that year, and she knew what was going on, and she was nervous, and my wife was nervous, and they had lots of good conversations that it's okay to feel that way, and to ask questions because knowledge is power, right? And by knowing of what's happening and knowing what the different events are, that dispels so much fear. And so,
Sure.
yeah, it was a challenge for them to go through, and I recognize that, and I can't tell you how cool it was though to be able to give them a call from space and share with them some of the things that we were doing at the time. Obviously, they had more nerves than I did. When T minus 0 hit, I was just smiling from ear to ear, and I'm sure they were nervous. And I had forgotten how much I get invested watching other humans launch on our vehicle, and until I went back and watched the replay and realized, oh, there were so many people that were connected or felt personally invested in this experience. I'd forgotten about that, and
Mm.
it's very emotional. It's moving, and you're hoping for the best and praying that the worst doesn't happen. And that's the perspective on the ground. Inside the vehicle, we literally were cracking jokes all the way up. So
But it's a very human thing to do, isn't it? And I don't
absolutely.
and I don't know what you think about it, but for me, the Inspiration 4 mission was very much a sort of turning point in the sort of handover of the baton from public companies to private companies taking people to space. It seems like a monumental moment. I mean, history will tell if it was really, I guess. But did you feel the sort of pressure and emotion of the event, or were you just focused on the mission?
No, you're absolutely right. If you watch the countdown and you look at my face, which for some reason the way they have the cameras positioned in Dragon, you could always see my face during the countdown, and you see me go from like this biggest grin to like some solemn expression and back and forth because I kept thinking about how we're going to space actually or here today, and then I was having those thoughts just like you said. This is Pad 39A. This is where people left to go to the moon. This is historic. This is the very first civilian orbital flight. Um, that how in the world am I going to live up to that historical uh, you know event and live that up? I had and then the thought would go back. Oh, but we're going to space. We're finally here. And yeah, that pressure is. We kept constantly saying, and I absolutely kept saying it too, is that we're building on the shoulders of giants that have come before us that have paved the way, um, and it's incredible to see uh, what SpaceX is doing or Blue Origin is doing, that continuing to build those roads that go to space, that make it open for more people. And yeah, I mean, have you say Inspiration 4 kind of opens the floodgates or opens the door, and I know the cost is still prohibitive for most people, right? And for nearly all people, let's just say that it's really expensive to go to space. But so is flying the airplane, across the continent. Back in the early 1900s. Not until more people invested and more vehicles were built, um, and now everybody has an opportunity to fly in an airplane to go anywhere. And it's economical. It's not like you have to spend your entire life savings to go, um, you know, on a major vacation. Space will get there, but it's going to be a while, and it's going to take some of these, groundbreaking events, and new vehicles to bring down those costs even more. And it's it's exciting. It's thrilling. It's, I think, what we've all been dreaming of ever since, Pan Am was advertising to the folks that saw the moon landings that they're going to have, orbital hotels and things like that back in the 60s and 70s.
And now that is becoming a reality,
It's getting there, yeah.
which is amazing. How how has the experience of space travel changed your outlook on life personally? Because I'm quite interested in the overview effect, and I'm chatting to Frank White in a few episodes' time, so I really want to hear, the man that coined the definition. But is that something that you feel? Do you feel the responsibility to communicate that and
Oh,
to?
I think that's a huge, yeah.
Mm,
We all talked about what we were visualizing we were going to see when we looked out of our cupola window or looked out the side windows at Dragon, um, and some of the things that we thought we were going to see, we saw. We didn't see lines or borders. We didn't see separation of people on the map. Saw a lot more clouds than I think we all expected, but I mean, because it's really a white cloud-covered planet more than a blue planet, which is great. But I think it really struck me in a way that is kind of hard to explain. I know Jared looked out and saw the moon and called him farther out, wondering why aren't we just gassing up and continuing our exploration farther away from Earth? I had the sense that um, even though I could feel the physical separation, and I physically saw this blackness of separation between us and the Earth and the atmosphere, that I still felt closer to the Earth and closer to home by looking back at it from that altitude than I had ever felt before. And um, it really put a lot of things in perspective, that some of the things that people fight about, some of the things we get really upset over really don't matter. And one of those things you talk about that pale blue dot images where you're seeing robotic spacecraft take pictures of the Earth while they're orbiting Saturn or Jupiter, and it's just this tiny little speck of blue dust in just a couple pixels of a photograph. And we're such in this place that's so fragile, but is such a great place to be from. It's like the best planet we have, and we have to take care of it and each other, and realize that there are a lot of things that we think are important that really don't matter, like the fight for power, the fight for material things. Those things really don't matter when it comes to realizing that uh, our our humanity and our friendship and our connection with each other are the most important.
it really is that cosmic perspective. Um, and I wonder if there'll be a tipping point when a certain amount of people get to space that will be enough to shift humanity's perspective and start to make, I'd love to start talking about Blue Origin actually, and I think Jeff Bezos going up was so important, um, and not just for not just for the PR reasons, but kind of the responsibility where influential people like that can affect change across huge companies and hundreds of thousands of employees. For them to see the Earth's fragility and our planet from space, I think is very,
Well, it's
very critical.
hugely important. That's one of the best gifts that these suborbital flights are giving us is more people and more leaders with that opportunity to experience that effect.
Mm.
Yeah, and like you said, Frank, I'm excited you're talking to Frank White soon, and he'll have a lot of great insight for you as well. And so I'm helping plug your future episodes. But I think it's a great thing that that we're doing, is being able to show people, um, the thinness of the atmosphere, and I mean, if we can travel around the entire Earth in just over an hour and a half, it really isn't that large of a place.
No, the world suddenly becomes 10 times smaller.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Blue Origin,
Okay.
because I think people like to compare SpaceX and Blue Origin, and the old tortoise and the hare analogy and all that. But what's your take on it? I'd love to hear actually how you started at Blue, and then kind of how you see Blue Origin's vision for the
Right.
future.
Well, I love that you said the tortoise and the hare. I mean, and it is. I totally grate in my mind to say it that way, because the crest that says Granitum Velociter has two tortoises on it, and it really, gosh, it is such an incredible place to work with such amazing people. And I think before I joined Blue Origin, it was always this company that seemed to be, very tight-lipped, and we're not telling a lot of people about exactly what they're doing. And so whenever they unveiled New Shepard and we saw their vehicle launch the first time, it was super exciting. And I think what's really cool about being at Blue Origin is that there is so much going on, and so many talented people that I I am so excited for the future to see people realize what it is that's been happening behind those doors, in those high bays, and I mean, as soon as New Glenn launches, I mean, it's the floodgates are going to open. We've got the lunar landing project that's coming up that we're in the process of with NASA, and I work on the New Glenn rocket, which is a reusable vehicle that's the size of the Saturn V rocket. Um, I mean, but comparing the two companies, SpaceX and Blue Origin, I mean, they are completely different, yet they also have very similar goals of using space for the benefit of humanity. Uh, and I think that's what's really cool about all of this is that the vision isn't just to build vehicles and to get a few footprints here or there, or bragging rights. There is actually a business plan and a model and a drive and a goal. I mean, SpaceX wants to put people on Mars. Blue Origin wants to use space for the betterment of Earth and for all humanity, and to make this place that we're from a better place. So all those things, they're not competing objectives. They're cooperative objectives that really impact and help promote the other. So oh, it's just really exciting to me. And then how did I end up going to Blue to begin with? Well, fortunately for me, Jeff Bezos founded Amazon and headquartered it in the Seattle, Washington area. And when was when I had first met my wife in the middle of Montana, we had decided where in the world are we going to grow up, or going to grow our kids, and raise them. And we both knew that Montana wasn't going to be the place for us for long term. And I love the mountains. She loved the ocean. So we headed out towards the west coast of the U.S. and landed in the Seattle area. And so by having Blue Origin land in the Seattle area, and we were here in the Seattle area, and then an opportunity came to work with Blue Origin. And we just love this region so much, being in the Pacific Northwest, and I love rockets so much that it was the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And from your so your day-to-day job, Blue Origin, is as a avionics engineer.
That's
Um,
correct. Yeah.
how does your experience being an astronaut does and how, if so, does that affect your work? Is it just the practical experience of interfacing with these things in space, or have you found many instances where it's sort of you've been able to offer a unique perspective because you've been there?
And so all of my experience doing electromechanical work comes from the Air Force or from my previous careers, working with building the automation and controls, and making sure high rises and college campuses and hospitals are running efficiently and saving energy. But this time I'm building something that's the size of a building, but it's actually going somewhere. So that's exciting. But so it's a lot of the same technical skills. However, you're absolutely right that when you get stuck working on a spreadsheet, your programming just isn't working, or you're debugging something for the 100th time, and you look around, or I feel frustrated. Um, those are moments where I take a step back and realize, okay, why in the world are we putting ourselves through this? And I'll minimize all the windows on my computer and just look at my background, because I put some of the images I took from space as my backdrop, and think, okay, all right, this view, this experience, this is what we are enabling, and this is why it's okay to be frustrated sometimes, because we are going to achieve something incredible, and it's coming around way sooner than we think it's going to. So keeping that perspective in mind, and then casually dropping in a story from space every now and then. It's really fun to be able to be in a job where you can talk about space all day and not be considered a distraction. So I'm very much thankful to be at Blue Orchard because of that.
That's fantastic, man. Well, look, I want to wrap it up because I try and keep these to half hour as much as possible. But just before you go, um, I want to thank you for being such an inspiration. As a normal astronaut, but as you say, you're not very normal. You're very inspiring. What advice would you give to anyone listening who, like me, isn't doesn't really see a path to space? I think there's going to be more opportunities that come up, but what would you recommend for young people who are potentially going to be watching the space industry for the next decades? How do we get involved?
How do we get involved? Well, the first thing that it get involved. Find what you're passionate about and stick to it. Make it known that you're the person that is the expert in that particular field, whatever it is, whether it's something to do with engineering or science or in art. And being part of Blue Origin also lets me to connect with the Club for the Future, which is their nonprofit arm that promotes K through 12 STEM education and initiatives that way. And so, if you have some questions that way, I encourage you to go to their website, clubforfuture.org, to find out more about how they're trying to inspire the next generation. Because if we go to space and reduce the launch costs, if we start using in-space resources, but we don't let the next generation know that that's what's available to them, then we're doing this with an end date. And so, getting everyone inspired that as they're coming in and seeing the opportunities ahead of them is super important. And so, just get involved with what you love and stay space adjacent until you find a way to get down the middle of what is right center line of what space is. And that's kind of how it ended up happening for me. It's how it happens for a lot of the folks that are on the Polaris Dawn crew or find their way on our New Shepard rockets, that they found ways to stay close to space. And then an opportunity came by that was unspeakably fantastic, and they found themselves on a path to space personally. So keep doing what you're doing and be excited about it. People will come to you when they want to answer those particular questions, and the next thing you know, you're the one that's strapped in a vehicle having to answer these questions, like speaking to you, Ben. So, yeah.
There you go, Chris Sembroski. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ben.